So on the way, I feel good today. Oh, oh, I'm feeling good. I hope you are. Remember, she's out of it. Hey, like, oh, ah, okay. Oh, there we are. Of mind. There we go. Now then, let's get this show underway. And I hope I'm being heard well. So let's begin. First of all, let's get this show underway. Let's thank Ian King, GalaxyAfui.net, who's taken us from night to day. Thank you, Ian King, and the management of GalaxyAfui.net. This show is transmitted via GalaxyAfui.net. Yeah. It is also transmitted live, of course, via YouTube under The Motivator Show. That's DE space Motivator Show. You can both see and hear my voice. Equally, we're transmitted live via Facebook. Yep, again under The Motivator Show. Yeah, it is sounding good. I've just checked both channels. Sounding very good. So, and I always say at this point, look, affirmation is good. Affirmation is brilliant. Give us a like, the thumbs up, subscribe, no cost at all. Further affirmation that the content of these shows meet with your requirements. And lastly, the show is also transmitted live via Mixcloud, audio transmission. So if all else fails, Mixcloud is there. Yep, and we'll look at other ways to transmit this program through other platforms simultaneously. So, the world is our oyster. Life is what we make it. This is the Motivator Show. This is where we translate our words into action, and where success is ours for the taking. Yeah, for the taking. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. So let's get things going. We'll be joined, I hope, by my co-presenter, who's been overseas, but she's back. But of course, this is the closing day of Ramadan. Yeah, Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim listeners and viewers. Eid Mubarak. I wish you all well, and I hope to join some of the celebrations this weekend. Okay, so I wish you all well. But this show today will focus on an issue which we very rarely touch on in previous occasions, and that is what's happening in the United States of America. Okay, and I'll get to that later. There's a particular personality today I want to focus on. Okay, and it's not an African American, just for the record. Okay, but nevertheless, you understand later on why I'll focus on this personality. But before that, I now need to get to the not health, lifestyle messages. Yeah, our lifestyle messages. They're important because, and many of you would understand this, illnesses in our community is rife. But many of the illnesses in our community are a result of our lifestyle, how we live our lives. Therefore, we are a powerful component. Yeah, we are powerful influence over our own health. Yeah, but our actions, deliberate actions, sometimes unconscious, admittedly, through habit, yep, admittedly. But as we raise our collective awareness, we can affect health outcomes. We can improve our general health and well-being, both in the present and to our older age. We can extend our lifespan, but extend it in such a way that we live it in a healthy, when your bones are still flexible, you're able to walk around and enjoy the fruits of life. It is our choice. Lifestyle is our choice. I say again, lifestyle is our choice. It's within our power to modify so that we are able to live a truly rewarding life. So I will get into the health messages, which are now going to be called lifestyle messages, as this wise woman suggested to me only a few weeks ago. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to begin and I'm slowing down because I want listeners, the viewers, prepare themselves to prepare their mind for what is to come. Because what I've discovered over time is that there is much going on in our community, And the consequence of what's happening in our community is that some people, in fact, maybe too many of our community, feel it's not within our or their control. But actually, that is always a fallacy. It is within our control. We have the power, of course, to define. I paused there. I wanted to sink in. So here are the lifestyle messages, because we can define and we can modify our behaviors for our collective good. I ask you to consider the amount of sugar and salt that you ingest every day. I ask you to consider consuming excessive amount of sugar and salt. What is the implication for you personally and for your family and communities generally? Okay? Because usually it's an individual decision that affects other decisions. Particularly if you are a parent or a guardian or a respected person. Your decisions influence others. And if you have been influenced by those who've suggested that consuming excessive amount of sugar and salt in the past, and you could see the implications, clearly you're recognizing the implications. I can see I've got a call on the line already. Caller, do I really have a call on the line already? No, I do not have a call on the line already. Never mind. That's fine. Okay. So I want to develop these thoughts with you. The implications, it doesn't affect us all, but it still affects too many of us, of eating or consuming more sugar than your body actually requires. Most food, non-processed food, I might add, come with a balanced amount of sugar or sucrose, fructose even. And our bodies are genetically programmed to process the sucrose. But the processed foods, of course, contain added sugars, processed sugars. And we all know what that means. We all know what that means. Our bodies are not genetically programmed to process it as efficiently as those natural born sugars from the fruits and vegetables that we consume usually. And herein lies the problem of modern day lifestyles. The problem is this: if every day you consume more sugar and more salt than you require, yes, particularly if you're young, your bodies can process it and excrete it very quickly, yep. But over time, as we can all testify, as you get older, your body is less efficient. It is less efficient at processing the sugar and the salt. Yeah, the sugars, of course, is the insulin that breaks it down so it's in an acceptable form for our bodies. Yeah, and over time, particularly if you've been gorging yourself on sugars every day, and last week I talked about the number of days that this might involve. Yeah, and in some cases, 365 days in a year, and over 10 years. You know how many days that is? 3,650 days. That's a significant amount of sugar you've taken in every day. The cumulative impact, it doesn't happen to us all, but all the stats show it's happening to far too many within the community, most certainly in the African Caribbean communities, continental African communities and those of heritage, okay? Most certainly in the Asians and sub-Asian continent, most certainly is the case. The Indian, Pakistanis, Bangladeshi communities. It's clear evidence our excessive consumption of sugar has led to high incidences of diabetes. And far too many of us know in our family networks, members of our families who now suffer from diabetes. Okay. So this is very much a lifestyle condition. Yes, type 1 diabetes is genetic, but the overwhelming majority of cases that are diabetes are type 2, which are a direct result of our lifestyle, excessive consumption of sugar. And many of us realize as children, we're given sweets as treats, yeah? And they stimulate the pleasure centers in our brain. So we easily form habits of eating sweets as children. And we take those habits into our adulthood. So the real question for us is, are we able to change our lifestyles? Yeah, to reduce gradually over time, I recommend the consumption of particularly processed sugars. I no longer buy sugar from the stores. I no longer buy sugar. Equally, I no longer buy salt. No need for it. It's already contained in the foods I consume. We consume it, indeed. Some people might need a little more extra, but they are the extreme minority. The overwhelming majority of us don't need the excessive amount of sugar and the salt. The salt, of course, causing the hardening of the arteries, and thereby the heart has to pump even more intensely, and the raising of our blood pressures, or hypertension as it's called. I urge you to consider the amount of sugar and salt that you consume every day. It's your choice, but I urge you to consider how much you're consuming. And if in doubt, please speak to a health professional. I'm not a health professional. Yeah, I'm an elected official, so I'm exposed to the reports and their analysis of the prevalence of particular condition diseases within the community and the likely causes of these conditions. But I'm not a health professional, okay? Speak to your doctors, speak to your nutritionists, speak to your nutritional pharmacists. or whoever has access to your medical records. They're the professionals, and they will provide you with the personalized medical and clinical advice. But I can assure you that the prevalence of diabetes and high blood pressure in our community, which is in some cases causing significant harm to members of the community's general health and well-being, is a cause for concern. And for that reason, I remind my listeners, my viewers, every week of the importance of thinking about the consumption of salt and sugar. Equally, I ask you to consider the amount of fat and carbohydrate you consume every day. Fat primarily derived from animal products. Okay. Our excessive consumption of fat is causing too many of us to have bloated shoulders, bloated abdomen, bloated thighs, bloated bottoms. And the consequence of that, of course, in other words, being overweight, yeah, the consequence is that it has knock-on health conditions. I'm not a specialist, so I'm not going to go through the list anymore, but it's sufficient for me to identify that being overweight as a direct result of your lifestyle, direct result of the overconsumption of fat, wherever it's derived from, usually from meat-based products, yeah, is a problem in our community. In the United States of America, can you imagine up to 80% of African-American women, black women, are overweight? They're heavier than the men, 80%. And of that figure, 80% of those who are overweight are obese, morbidly obese, forgive me, morbidly obese. In this country, not as bad, but it's still above 60%, a ridiculous figure, absolutely ridiculous figure. We can and we must do better. And I know I say it every week, but dairy products are simply another form of cow's fat. Cheese, butter, margarines, yeah, are just another form of cow's fat. You know, when you spread it on your bed, on your bread, that's simply spreading fat on your bread. And I know we formed a habit as children, but you know better now. You have higher levels of awareness. We must do better for our collective general health and well-being. And the carbohydrates, of course, we eat this in far too great extent, primarily derived from wheat products and some root vegetables, okay, such as the yam. I know, I heard you, particularly from West Africa. I hear you. But the excessive consumption of these carbohydrates, okay, eaten every day, over time, your body becomes less efficient in excreting it out of itself. Because the storing can only go so far. Storing in your body can only go so far. So the challenge for you is how to change your habit. And I get it. I absolutely get it. Absolutely get it. But if you see the fat in the meat, think, this is not good for me. Yeah, it's likely to clog up my arteries. It's likely that I'm going to store it and bulk up my body. It's likely not in the long term to do my body any good. Just say that to yourself and repeat it to yourself, because it is going to be a challenge to change habits. It is going to be a challenge. And the last ingredient I want to mention is, of course, starch. Starch primarily derived from he says rice. I'm from the Caribbean. We've got our many rice dishes. And of course, from West Africa, most of Africa, there are many rice dishes. I understand it. The problem for us is the quantum that we eat every day. That's the problem. I'm told by the professionals we should be eating no more than a fistful per sitting. No more than a fistful. And that's the challenge. Can you limit your intake to a fistful when you've had a whole lifetime of eating far greater quantums? I know the challenge. I understand the challenge for many of us because I've had to go through myself, and it took 10 years for me to eventually stop buying sugar from the grocery store. 10 years, can you imagine? It still remains an addictive chemical. I developed addiction as a child, but to keep it under the use of euphemism from Jamaica, under heavy manners. Hey, huh? I've had to be quite clear with myself that I am better than the urge to consume sugar. Yeah, I am stronger than that urge. Yeah, and I recognize the likely dangers it would have for me as a person, and therefore I was not and will not succumb to that urge. That urge was developed as a child through the overconsumption of sweets. Okay, but once you start to are able to demonstrate yourself self-control, yeah, you become and you feel empowered. You become and you feel empowered. I'm going to say it a third time. You become and feel empowered. That's an awesome feeling. I can assure you, it is an awesome feeling. It's even more awesome when you know that you're feeling better inside yourself. Because the doctors, the nutritionists, those who understand human physiology, all recommend we should drink an appropriate amount of water each day, between 2 to 3 liters. Okay, I've got my bottle here. You can hear it. Yep, I put, in my case, a bit of ginger in the water. Like the ginger, anti-inflammatory, and so on. Yeah, between 2 to 3 liters of water per day. They all agree that we should consume far more fruits and vegetables, particularly green vegetables. They all agree we should do this. More fruits and vegetables, particularly green vegetables, but a broad range of vegetables nevertheless. And keep meat consumption to the minimum, no more than 5%, 10% at the most. To the minimum. Yeah. And they absolutely agree that if you are to live a long, healthy life, you must exercise, particularly us here in Europe, much of the Caribbean, the Americas, and so on. Yeah, yeah. We must exercise. Yeah. I have a lifestyle which requires that I sit down a lot and talk to people directly. Yeah, it's just the nature of these things. We must exercise. It's an absolute requirement for us. We must exercise. You see, I do the exercise. I've got my weights handy here. There we go. I have my weights, and I love my exercise, my weights. I love the running. I love to run. I love to stretch. Yeah, I like to jump. I like the skipping ropes I've got. Oh my gosh. And I can tell you, I enjoy the sweating that appears on my brow. Yeah. And at the end of it, I sweated, my heart is raced, I feel vigorous, I've eaten well, and I develop a positive outlook to life. Yeah, that's the way to maintain a long, healthy lifestyle. The lifestyle messages would not be complete without referencing the need for us to be concerned and care for our mental and spiritual health. if in doubt in terms of your mental health, I urge you to speak to a health professional. Go to your doctor. Yeah. Please, I urge you to do so. There is no need for you to suffer in silence. Yeah. Don't hide. Do not be in any way embarrassed if you have doubt about your mental health. I urge you to seek professional help. And your spiritual health is equally as important. You know? Those of you who have spiritual counselors, I urge you to speak and practice with them daily. Yeah, I urge you to do so. And those of you who understand and quiet contemplation also provide provide support for your mental and spiritual health. To meditate. To meditate is a powerful tool to enable you to take in the energy. So focus your mind, listen to your body, and be settled inside. I recommend meditation at least 30 minutes per day. And I challenge you to do so. Meditation where you don't allow other external noises and interference to interfere with your feeling of internal contentment. Mm-hmm. I recommend meditation to you. And my last comment here on the lifestyle messages, I want to thank those hundreds, many hundreds of responses I've received in regards to this part of the show. Okay, I want to thank you all from the top of my heart in recognition that you practice, you responded, you practice, and you influence others to do the same. If there's any reason to be an elected official, and that is to influence others in a positive way. So I'm really pleased, really pleased with the responses I've received and the guidance sometimes also provided to me from wise counsel from the many hundreds, if not thousands, of wise listeners to these shows and past shows. Okay. So thank you all for your positive feedback. And long may you continue to be healthy and positive always. Okay, and help those who need the help, because clearly that's an expression of our highest humanity, you know? That's an expression of our highest humanity. All righty, that's it. Close the lifestyle messages. Thank you for your feedback, but continue the feedback because that helps a great deal, okay? And you are able to write into the messages into the studio. If you are viewing us via Facebook or YouTube, there's a message section there, chat section, I suppose the youngsters would call it. Happy to interact with you, because the topic of today's show will prove quite interesting, I'm sure. But if in doubt, I want to say this again, if in doubt, seek professional advice, okay? Professional advice. Do not suffer in silence, okay? Do not suffer in silence, okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I want to move on to recognizing some of our past contributors. Just a quick few minutes on this, okay? Just a quick few minutes, okay? First of all, I want to recognize Dr. Carlton Brown. Okay, I thought that particular show went very well last week. He was a very erudite personality with a very clear agenda. And that is, of course, the economic development within our communities, okay? We want to see those who have business acumen, for them to rise, yeah, and to be given an opportunity to shine, given the opportunity to receive the investment, yeah, both within and from outside of our community. Okay, so I want to wish him well. I want to wish him well. Yeah. And the author of the Black Entrepreneurs Report 2021, a seminal document. And if you've not seen the document previously, I'd wish to commend that document to you. Okay? I wonder if I've got a copy of it here. I'm got it handy yet, but I'll get it up later on. I would commend it to you. Okay. He's promised that the future Black Business Network conferences, it currently is sold out. Sold out a month before the event. So you know clearly the event is popular and the location is too small. Okay, Dr. Carlton, get a bigger venue, please. The desire, the thirst in the community, yeah, for economic empowerment, knows no bounds. Yeah, the numbers of men and women who want to set up enterprise, okay, is astonishing. The numbers of highly talented people who will make really forward-thinking, successful businessmen and women, okay. The numbers are just overwhelming. So I'm proud of the work of Dr. Carlton Brown, and long may you continue. And if you want to contact him, you can contact him via Aspire Consultancy. Okay, I don't mind giving that details out again. Aspire Consultancy. So long may his work continue, and those who are affected by his work, long may his work and their work continue. Okay, it's an important part of this other process underway within the community, which of course is reparations. And all the professions will tell you, reparations begins with self. We've got to self-repair, help each other to self-repair. Okay, and that broader reparations agenda absolutely will come together, continue to come together to pursue that broader reparations agenda. Well, the previous week to that, and some of you will recall the wonderful gentleman, okay, CK, so I get it right, CK. Okay. His focus, of course, was young people. Okay, how to successfully engage young people, our children, if you like. Mm-hmm. The suggestion that our children don't listen to us adults was always and is a fallacy. What they respond to is positive engagement, meaningful engagement. That's what they respond to. Mm-hmm. And that's why I would willingly urge you all to consider. So he has been able, almost single-handedly, to set up facilities here in London that specifically engages young people and create, structure in their lives. So he is a trusted guardian by hundreds of parents. A trusted guardian. Him and his team are trusted guardians. Oh yeah, people like that, I've got no choice but to support. No choice whatsoever. He's an example of who we all are. Mm-hmm. He also set up facilities for young people who have lost their way and need to be taken out of their immediate environment. He's produced safe houses for them, safe places for them, so they can rebuild their lives. Again, any human being, man or woman, who's capable of thinking about the issues and finding solutions. Oh yeah, I have your back at all times. Less of the complaints, less of the moaning, Let's action. Actions speak louder than words. That's why this show was set up. These shows are set up. The Motivator. This is where we translate our words into action and where success is ours for the taking. That's the affirmation, CK. Well done, CK. Keep up the good works. Yeah? Keep up the good works. I also want to recognize, how many of you remember the young man, our young son, Ahmadine, okay, whose parents sent him over to Kenya at a time in which he was finding it difficult, or he wasn't feeling as engaged in his studies. Went to Kenya and his eyes were opened up. His world was expanded. The world of opportunities, yeah, the world of hope and aspiration. And he came back to London, fired up, fired up, fired up. He said, I'm going to study, he said. He told his mother, I'm going to study and I will gain my degrees. I will gain my professional education. I will gain those skills. And I'm going to go back to Africa. How many people in my generation have said, we're going back to Africa? Huh? This young man has made it clear he's going back to Africa. Once he's completed his education, acquired all those skills, his investment will be the skills, the capital that he takes back to Africa to be a part of that renewal process. I had no choice, once I'd spoken to his mother, to have that young man here on the Motivator Show, where we translate words into action and where success is ours for the taking. Affirmation. Affirmation. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ahmadine, he's promised before going back to Africa, he will be here and he will hopefully share some of his plans with us. Had further inspiration to others to do the same. I had no choice but to interview him. The energy that flowed from that particular episode was astonishing. Astonishing. The numbers of young people, yeah, between the ages of 18 and 30 that I spoke to subsequent to that particular show, numbers in more than 400 or so, just trying to recall the number, more than 400. That was the impact he had just on me and the immediate circles. How many thousands did he affect across Britain and other places? Ahmadine? Huh? Ramadan Mubarak. I know you're enjoying your Eid today, so I wish you well. Long may you continue your good works. All right, I'll pause there, but I said I've had some impressive guests on this show, and that's just a few of them. There are others I want to give light to, but I'll give light to them in future weeks. But nevertheless, today's show is an important one. I don't often discuss American politics. I tend to go to Africa, and I've got particular interest right now in Nigeria because the situation in Nigeria we need to keep monitoring. Okay, the last election brought home to me, if it hadn't been fully recognized, that we need to observe what happens in Africa, and most certainly in the largest democracy in Africa, Nigeria. Okay, and we will return to Nigeria the later or the early part of next month. But for now, we're going to focus on United States or States of America. Okay, this will be an important show. I'm going to put the logo, so give you a hint of the theme. I want to look at this personality by the name of Donald J. Trump, and what he means for African Americans, black people, or non-white people, he says, in the United States of America, and what that means for the rest of the world. Because there is implications. He seeks, despite the fact he was a one-term president, the people of the United States of America rejected the second term. Okay. And those of you who've watched the preview of this show, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to bring up this preview on screen and I'm going to talk to it. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk to it in a second. If I can bring it up. I want to bring it up because those of you who are viewing this via YouTube and Facebook will see the graphics as they go across the screen. Okay. So, Donald J. Trump. Okay. First former American president to be criminally charged or indicted. Donald J. Trump, his business files for bankruptcy on 6 occasions. He allegedly inspired the 6th of January insurrection in the Capitol, United States of America. Mm-hmm. So today's show will be inviting African Americans to speak out. It was impeached twice. Can you imagine? During a single term, he was impeached twice. Can you imagine? In other words, he was formally censured by the House of Representatives in the Congress. Imagine, impeached twice, and now he very recently has been criminally charged or indicted, as the Americans say, criminally charged. Okay, so I assert it was a failed presidency. That's why I'm going to assert. Yeah, he's been divorced twice in very acrimonious circumstances. Okay, it's likely that his current wife, his third wife, is likely. Well, let's wait and see. We don't want to wish on anyone, but let's wait and see. Okay, because even she must be suffering some embarrassment, and that's to put it very mildly. That's to put it very mildly. So I want to look at Donald J. Trump, okay, and what he means, and if for heaven's sake, if that was to happen, that he was to be re-elected as the American president, what potentially that could mean for not only African Americans or black people or non-white people in the United States, what that could mean for the rest of the world. Because clearly, Donald J. Trump, well, he courts right-wing bigots. Some people refer to him being Nazis. Yeah? Right-wing bigots. He only seems to enjoy the company of, well, those who are dictators or autocrats. It's not me saying this, he says it. Yeah? Not me, he says it. Yeah? I don't want to speak badly of the man, but I have to observe that Donald J. Trump seems to be a personality that courts controversy. So I'm hoping that my guest will arrive. I've sent my guest the link to the studio via the WhatsApp, and I can send it by the means if he wishes. But I hope my guest will join us shortly. And assuming that happens, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to read an article which discusses Donald J. Trump. Okay. But the article begins by saying Trump is a historic loser No other one-term president has refused to leave office in American history. Can you imagine? He's refused to leave office. Okay. So it's obvious by now that former President Donald J. Trump, a narcissist, is a narcissist. Okay. Desperately afraid of being thought of as a loser. But he is a loser. He is a loser. But anyway. Now, he's gone through incredible lengths to deny the results of the 2020 election. Now, Donald Trump, as we all know, being the Apprentice show, he uses the epitaph loser as a go-to insult before taking office. But he will now be remembered as one of the handful of sitting presidents to seek a re-term or re-election, but rebuffed by the American peoples. Okay, so one moment. I've got a message from my guest. Let me just check my link for my guest. One moment, people. Whilst I'm doing this, I'm just going to do this. So Donald J. Trump, in so many ways, has demonstrated a willful disregard for American jurisprudence. Let me go on to explain what I mean by that. Let me go and explain I think my guest arrived. I'm just going to read a little more of this article. Okay. What is an additional insult to this is that up to 77% of Republicans claim, either sincerely or in bad faith, that President Biden didn't legitimately win. Can you imagine? Up to 77% of American Republican voters were suggesting this. And this is primarily because of this news channel by the name of Fox News. Yeah. Now, that particular channel, which has recently had to pay out more than $650 million to the company responsible for the voting machines, okay, has had to admit, if they haven't, they will have to admit, they got it wrong. Their news presenters were presenting erroneous information to their viewers. Right. Anyway, let me just bring in my guest. Let's see if we can get the sound right. Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, all.
Wonderful. Our local American correspondents. Huh? What a country. You live in a fascinating country, I've got to say.
Is it now?
But I understand you live in Florida as well. So you're not.
Yes, I do.
Oh, so you're not far from Donald J. Trump's home, I believe.
No, not as far as you are. I'm far closer than you are to he.
Right. Okay. Wow. Oh, wow. First of all, I'm going to just ask you, please, before I begin, because I really wanted to talk about American. Maybe you might just tell the listeners why you are so interested in American current affairs. Why that? Just introduce yourself.
Good morning, all. And I guess good evening to the ones who are still in the night hours in America. I am Jay. I am a resident of the United States. I've lived in different countries, but I am a U.S. citizen, and I call the United States my home. And I've lived in Florida most recently for the past 14 years.
Okay. And I noted you live in Florida, and I will talk about Florida in a few moments.
Mhm.
Can you share with the listeners, we don't often get to speak to Americans on this platform, what it was like to live through January 6th, the insurrection in your capital city?
Well, it was hmm, it
Mhm,
was interesting because protest is something that is kind of ingratiated into American culture. So if you don't agree with something, we're very big on people protesting. We're big on the this versus that kind of mentality. Um, though January 6th was more a misinformation campaign
mhm,
than a full facts protest. So when the news was reporting certain stories, and this unfortunately happens in the United States quite often, excuse me, you have a group that may take a particular stance. And when they take that stance, a lot of people do not go and look for themselves
mhm,
the information. So,
mhm,
they once said if you wanted to hide information, the
mhm,
best place to hide it is in a book. And in this day and age, the best place to hide it is in the open internet because you can do informational searches and you can find opposing views. You can also find information that may refute certain claims or support it.
mhm.
But you need to make sure that the information is credible, not just information that supports it. You could go into Google and say um, that strawberries is the best fruit on the planet, and there's going to be a website that supports that view. But then there may be one that says, okay, well, this kind of isn't the best fruit because a banana could be considered better because of potassium, let's say. A lot of people I find in this day and age, though they have access to a lot of information, are not willing to go out and verify information before they take a stance. And so with January 6th, you had a lot of word of mouth, so to say, individuals that didn't verify information and just went with what they were receiving. I think it's quite irresponsible of the media being allowed to put out false information and not.
If I may, Jay, would it be fair,
Mhm.
when you say the media, you don't mean the whole media, the corporation. Is there particular media channels? Fox being one, I believe.
Yeah, well, with Fox, as you've previously stated, they're under litigation right now, um, in reference to the claims that they made for a company named Old Dominion. They're the ones who run a great many of our polling boxes. And so they alleged that some kind of way they were sorting with the quote unquote other side to pull votes or to make false votes. There's videos and audio that refutes that, and that they knew that they were putting out false information when they were putting it out, and they were simply putting it out for the sake of ratings.
Well, just so we're clear then, so they've already agreed, the owner, Rupert Murdoch, has already agreed to pay more than $650 million in settlement of the case, I understand.
Hmm. That is true. And the thing about it is, though, it's when you spread false information, it catches on really quick, like wildfire. Now to come these years later and say, well, we weren't actually telling the truth and we were pushing this narrative for ratings. When you have years and years of them saying, don't trust the media, this information from us is the only true information. And the ones who spread the false information or misinformation aren't the ones on the camera saying we were wrong, because they won't publicly admit it to that extent. So let's say there's a gentleman by the name of Tucker Carlson. He's not coming out and stating that he put out false information, though they have audio of him conspiring to put out false information for better ratings. He has not publicly, with the same strength and power behind his words, stated that publicly. So then that misinformation and that distrust of the media continues, because he could just say, hey, we were wrong. And maybe the information I had that day is what I went with, and I didn't know how to pull it back.
Oh, but Dave, let's get this right. It's in the public domain that he was sending texts to the Fox.
This is true. But if someone's not willing to research it, then the information, it doesn't matter. Just because you have proof of something, that doesn't matter to a group of people who for years have distrusted everything unless it comes from these particular people. Yes, logically, you would say you could check, but they made it so that these individuals don't trust any information unless it comes from these particular individuals. So yes, you and I could say, yes, you can look for the answer yourself, but unless these people are told by the individuals who spread the lies that they were lying, they're never going to believe that it was a lie. We still have people this day that don't believe, one, anything was wrong with the insurrection. Also, this day, you still have individuals who will argue up and down that President Biden isn't the quote unquote true president of the United States. I don't know what he is then if he isn't, because he's surely sitting in that position, and re-election campaigns are going to start soon. So kind of doesn't make any sense that he's been allowed to be a false president for all of this time and no one has done anything about it. So the rest of the country believes he is the president, you know.
But Jay, I made them. So this is, I'm really appreciative that we're getting a African-American perspective on these issues, and that we need to do this more often with other African-Americans right across the country. Okay. One of the reasons why I want to do this is despite the fact that the American voters clearly rejected Donald Trump as the second-term president, okay? And what is noted, of course, is that Biden, I believe, secured more than 81 million votes, and Trump 76 million votes. So it's a pretty wide margin. How it is that could in any way be considered to be a close run race, I just don't understand. That's a pretty close, pretty wide margin. But nevertheless, Trump has been able to affect not only the American political discourse, but of course the relationship between different communities across America. And it does appear that right-wing fascist behaviors appear to be right on the rise. Is that an impression you get in Florida?
I don't really feel that more behaviors are on the rise. I think more behaviors are being better exposed.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Because there are many things that I've experienced personally or have observed through the years in this country, but it didn't have proper exposure.
Indeed.
We live in a digital age, so everyone has a telephone. So everyone is able to see in real time situations unfold.
I understand, yes.
But I don't I can't say that there's necessarily more. I just think it's more widely exposed. And also the news, unfortunately here, and this is on all sides, will be like a dog with a bone and harp on a particular type of situation. And it's been shown, regardless of leaning for a channel, how they depict different groups when it comes to incidences. Um,
I,
for example, we had this odd thing is going on where a lot of people are stating that they're afraid, and there it's a shoot first kind of mentality lately in America. We had a teenager, the end of March, he was going to pick up his younger brothers from a home and he was shot through the door.
yeah.
Um, the young,
Mhm.
the teenager, he was black, and the gentleman who shot him was an older white guy, um, who's claiming he was afraid um, of the young person who rung the doorbell.
By accident, I understand. By accident, he went to the wrong door.
Mhm. Right.
Uh-huh.
He rung the wrong bell. Then recently we had a young lady, it was a group of, she and her friends were in their SUV. They pulled into the wrong driveway um, to make a U-turn, because once they realized they weren't at the right address, they were trying to pull away. The owner of the home, who happened to be a white male, started shooting at the vehicle. And the young lady wound up dying miles away. The young lady was white. Um, she died. Both cases were based on perceived fear of the gun owner. And I say perceived because it's always easy for you to say you were afraid in a situation that you may not have actually been afraid in, um, because that's something that you can't really measure. You have to believe a person to say that they were afraid. Um,
Yeah.
the way the media depicted both stories, we do a lot of victim blaming here in America when a situation happens. And usually they'll dive into the person's background to show why that individual may not have been as innocent. So, where the boy was shot, the 16-year-old was shot in his head and in his arm, and amazingly was able to run away. Um, One of his grandsons is saying he has a history of being extremely racist and having right winged, extreme right winged beliefs. And he's one of those people who watches Fox News all day and believes every single theory that they have out there.
Yeah.
And he wasn't surprised that his grandfather behaved in this manner. Now, his other grandson immediately said mistakes were made all around. Now, that is a true statement in only the sense that this teenager went to the wrong house. That was the only mistake he went. He went to the wrong house. Now, to say that equal mistakes were made all around, that's just completely incorrect.
Sounds like
Because,
Tom, does it?
right, I mean, I've rung an incorrect bell, and, thankfully, I'm here to tell the story that I've rung an incorrect bell, as people have rung my bell incorrectly and have been able to walk away alive from the situation as well. But initially, the news was trying to look into this 16-year-old's life to see who he was, kind of to justify this behavior. Oh, to make this man a hero, until they found out he's a talented musician,
Right, yeah.
and he's what we would call a great young man, a good example for all. And so the narrative had to change. So we can't blame him, especially since he lived, we can't blame him for anything other than going to the wrong home, right? And so now we're trying to make people be sympathetic to this older guy to justify his behavior. Oh, he's old and he was scared. But when someone rung his bell, the first thing he did was grab his gun to go answer the door. The
But
problem with that kind of behavior is you have years and years of the news as a whole always making minority characters into villains, right? And so if you hear that over and over, that these people are like the big bad wolf in the story, when you come across this big bad wolf, you're inherently going to be afraid, even though all of your actual experiences, you realize the wolf was actually a sheep.
I,
You know that the big bad wolf is out there. And it's never been my experience that someone's going to ring a bell prior to breaking into your home. Most thieves do not behave in that manner, especially here in America. Most people have camera doorbells. So if I'm a criminal, and I'm going to pretend that I would be a smart criminal, because it would be foolish to be anything other, why would I ring a doorbell that can capture all of my moves
yeah.
in that manner? Now, when they ran the story of the lady who she was 19, who went into the wrong driveway, immediately the police chief, I know her family, she's a great girl, this didn't need to happen, which is true because neither situation needed to happen. But immediately they put out the story how great she was, and that this man who shot at the vehicle is psychotic, and no one is even working towards him fearing for his life because he's being branded as a psychotic person, which the behavior is psychotic for both shooters. But it's the narrative that's pushed many times in these stories that becomes the issue. And is that on a rise since Trump was president? Sort of,
Okay.
but not, because this has been a narrative that's been in the works since the end of slavery. Once an item that was sought after with top dollar wanted to get more freedoms, then we're going to do like an anti-campaign so that they're no longer desirable once they're supposed to get an even wage for their work. They became lazy and shiftless. But 10 years prior, it was a desirable asset that you went to auctions for. And it's just been that type of villainous attacks or categorization for minorities since then. So no, nobody would want those people because we've spent 100+ years making them to be the bad person. So it's not, that can't just rest on Trump's shoulders in that respect, because this is something that's been going on since kind of the end of slavery,
I need to
to
ask
brand people a particular way.
of you, if I may, because you sort
Mhm.
of, and what you're really emphasizing is, uh, as an American, you're able to take a more sanguine view on the condition of what it is like to live in the United States of America. You can appreciate here in Britain, looking over the pond, as it were,
Mhm.
idea that someone, just because a stranger knocks the door, your first instinct to pick up a gun and to shoot through the door seems, well, that's beyond the pale. It's
Mhm.
well, it's difficult to even consider. But my real question to you was, of course, around, is fascism on the rise in the United States of America? I think you're saying not. What is happening is that the fascism that exists there is being highlighted far more frequently than it was in the past. Would
Hmm.
that be a fair assessment of what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, well, okay. How can America transform itself? Because we think of George Floyd, and we've all seen that video, and we're pleased that Chauvin is in prison and he stays there for a long time. But of course, we see many examples of police brutality in the United States of America. Okay, but the very same police are being supported or being jeered on by Donald J. Trump.
Yes. So it's a multi-layered issue
Mhm.
because, again, like I stated before, America has this very us versus them kind of behavior, as opposed to saying police brutality is wrong. However, I do support the police. It's
Mhm.
important to be able to support an entity, but be able to call out poor behaviors of
Ab-
some.
Absolutely.
And there's some people who believe if I call out the behaviors, then it seems as though I'm withdrawing my support for a particular group.
Mhm.
And until we fix that mentality, it'll always be an issue. Because when you say, I don't support police brutality, and I think as a whole, people don't support police brutality. However, they don't know how to navigate with calling out any group of people's wrongs and still supporting them. As a friend, I can support you and tell you that your behaviors are wrong and still fully support you and tell you, in America, we'll say, I can tell you to adjust your crown, right? So I can still support my girlfriends in everything that they do and still call out a behavior that may not be desirable behavior or may not capture them in the best light. Until we're able to do that here in this country, we're going to still have this problem.
Okay, can I just say this? So we have an interesting analogy here in London and the
Hmm.
Metropolitan Police Force. Note the word force. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, it has had characteristic similarities to the Chicago police force and similar forces such as that, where they've got good evidence of police brutality, particularly aimed at those who are black or other majority world populations in America. Okay, it has the same problem here in Britain, and we've had a series of reports, but the most recent report, which looks at the behaviour of the Metropolitan Police Force by one of the academics here by the name of Baroness Casey. Okay, and what she noted, and again, for someone of my age, I've seen these reports. What she noted was the Metropolitan Police Force, she asserts, is institutionally racist. She also asserted that the Metropolitan Police is also misogynistic, in other words, sexist, and it's also homophobic as well, institutionally homophobic. Wow. It's one of the most damning reports I've ever read, even though the early reports on the Metropolitan Police Force were pretty damning in their own right. This one, without a shadow of a doubt, was worse. Because what we were able to identify, you allowed the force to develop institutional racist behaviors as part of its internal culture, but it's now extended to being homophobic and sexist as well. Okay. It's in many ways a natural extension. And I wonder, when this happens with police forces in the US, okay, is there a sort of similar pattern that police forces that were identified as being institutionally racist are also now equally being identified as being misogynic, in other words, sexist, or indeed homophobic as well? Is there a similar pattern in the US?
Well, we have that pattern in the US, but I think a lot of people don't look at what these entities were created for or when they were actually created, right? So the purpose of the police at that time, when in the US, when they were created, was to round up the runaway slaves or people who may have looked differently that were pursuing freedom. So when your job is to round up different people, that's part of your foundation or the fundamentals of your organization. And so for years and years, this is what you've done. And to be honest, that is what is depicted of them still.
Mhm.
We have also that we found a lot can be xenophobic. And it's not a large percentage. I need to say that. It's not the full force,
Mhm.
because I mean, we have minorities that work for the police department and women. It's the problem isn't the whole, the problem is the fact that there's a large percentage of people who stand idly behind and quietly
Correct.
and don't call out the poor behavior. So those couple of bad apples do spoil the bunch, as opposed to saying these are bad apples and we're going to discard those and make it hard for those apples to ever be around anyone else. So that's what makes the whole entity becomes the problem. But from the creation of our law enforcement in America, it was never created to protect
Mhm.
people who were different. Um,
But if I may, though, Jay,
mhm,
Jay, because whilst you're correct, that is the legacy, as it were.
mhm,
The individuals who are in the force and the politicians that overall strategic oversight of these forces or police services, as the correct term, have had time to evolve. And what I have to challenge often, both those in public life and indeed members of the police, is that they cannot seek to protect bad apples, as you refer to them, in
mhm,
the good name of the force of the service. If they call out and weed out those bad apples, then the service will thrive and be respected by the people for whom they serve.
mhm.
And it is that which is I'm interested to see if there is a movement within the US that, particularly in relation to the police force, that we empower police officers to call out those in the service who are the bad apples, who poorly represent the police professionalism, okay, who undermine confidence in the police services by their very action. I wonder if there's a similar movement in the US. I've heard.
So there actually
Mhm.
is, but we call it the blue wall. You know, um, it's a band of brothers of sorts. For when you are an officer and you decide that you are going to call out that behavior, a lot of people band together and they don't want that person to speak out. And it's so crazy because when you know someone's doing something wrong, you should definitely want to call it out. But for some reason, um, you tend to see adverse actions happen towards those individuals who try to call out the behavior. Now, when I was in the military, um, we're notorious for getting rid of people when they misbehave. However, I guess it's harder for them because they're more of a local entity and we're more of a global enterprise. Um, but that is something that needs to um, be fixed in their culture because it's more of a culture issue of, just like with gangs, quote unquote, snitching. Snitching isn't really kind of like desirable behavior. And you see that kind of mentality with them as well. that a person who's a whistleblower kind of suffers the same fate,
Mhm.
which really doesn't make any sense because they're kind of anti gangs with their profession, but then adopt gang mentality within their own culture. Um, but it is something that we have quote unquote protections for that individual, but being ostracized, you can't really protect someone from that. You can protect them in the sense that they don't lose their job for challenging and highlighting information that is wrong. But you can't change how people are going to treat them. And so when they become ostracized and isolated in their profession, it becomes hard for them to be that only person out there, and they're viewed as not being part of the team. They're anti-team or anti this when they're actually trying to improve the team.
Yes,
You
yes.
know.
You're right. And you make a really good point. And I've said it many times in public, like I said, uh, good officers protecting bad makes those good officers just as bad.
Hmm.
Okay? Say to them, good officers protecting the bad officers makes the good officers just as bad. Okay? And therefore, the service itself would never improve. But I acknowledge that there are
Hmm.
wonderful, good apples in US police services across the various states who I've been able to identify and I've written to, seeking their advice. Because being a public official over here, there's always advice you can glean from our colleagues across the pond, as it were. Which is why we're speaking to you today, Jay. I know you are going to provide some interesting insight. Can I now take us on, if I may, to Trump and Georgia and the various litigation that he's now exposed to? Okay. So Malvin Bragg in Manhattan, Long Island, Manhattan. Okay, his case is going forward. It's quite clear that the Georgia case with Letitia James will go forward. What prospects would you hold out for Donald Failure Trump securing the Republican ticket to be their candidate for the next president of the United States?
Well, um, I I feel that so right now his name is the only one that's confirmed out there that is running for president. Um, no one else on either side has actually officially thrown their hat into the ring. Um, I I'm less concerned with him becoming president if he were to run again, than the current governor that the Florida people have to
Oh,
endure. Um,
ah,
so I am completely less concerned with Trump because I don't know how it's being reported over there. Um, he's kind of changing his narrative,
what is
um,
okay?
which is interesting in itself because he's now in support of things that he spent years having a platform of being against. So he's kind of, even if he ran, he's kind of hurting himself with his conflicting and opposing views of his own self. So it'll be interesting. I look forward to the debates to see how they're going to handle it. I think a lot of people are afraid to run against him. And I was in the doctor's office maybe 2 months time ago. My father was having a procedure and I was in the waiting room, and this old lady, she just was on her rat way too early in the morning. And she said she didn't want the governor of Florida to run for president because, Florida needs him to protect, quote unquote, us from
Wow.
whomever they are. I don't know where this false fear came from because as old as she is, she's endured many things. And she didn't seem as though life adversely impacted her. Um, Donald Trump is, I don't see him being as much of an issue.
Well,
There's a lot of millennials and Gen Xers and Gen Zs that'll be able to vote in this next election that tend not to gravitate towards him. It's more people of your generation
yes.
that support him than of mine and the ones before, you know, granddad's generation. They love him like apple pie. Um,
Interesting.
so those people are less and less of support towards him. Um, just when it comes to everything, he's kind of becoming like that crazy old uncle in the corner that people hear him speaking, but they kind of
Mhm.
discard anything that he says for any actual truth and importance. So he's kind of being casted because he always runs on this I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm kind of perfect model. And he, you know, Joe Biden's too old to be president. They're only a year apart, which to the rest of us, okay, um, my generation and the ones after,
Yes.
it's it's like when identical twins, which I have, argue and say, "You're ugly."
Mhm.
Well, we have the same face. So if I'm ugly, then you're ugly kind of mentality.
Indeed.
When Trump calls Joe Biden old, you're a year apart. So you're just as old when you're filling out a data sheet and they're putting your categories. Y'all are in the same range for the
Mhm.
age group. You're the same age to the rest of us. And
Yes.
yes, 1 year makes a difference, but not really to the rest of us. So I think with Trump, a lot of people are distracted by his previous behaviors. He has legal situations going on. Um, I don't really see a lot of them sticking, to be quite honest,
Yes.
because it's so delayed. I don't see him going to jail. I literally don't see him going to jail because one thing he's managed to do cleverly through the years of him existing is finding someone else that's willing to fall on the sword.
Yeah.
And so
Michael.
Michael Cohen,
Yeah.
Flynn, like everyone, if you're around him and you're in his force, in his field, it's going to be you way before it will be he. So I don't see any of it sticking. Like he's already admitted that he slept with Stormy Daniels, right? So no one should be shocked. I remember when I was younger, when he was married to his first wife, and in New York, everyone was talking that he was with Marla Maples, which is Tiffany's mother.
Right.
Marla Maples used to be a denim jeans model. That
Mhm.
was big talk of the town. And as a kid, I knew that was his girlfriend. Now, as a kid, I also knew that if you're a husband, you're not supposed to have a girlfriend, you know, without ever being married. I knew that that wasn't correct behavior. But everyone accepted
Mhm.
that behavior back then.
Mhm.
So it's not anything that is a big to do in America that he slept with an adult movies actress.
I
That's
think it,
almost like a goal for gentlemen here.
I don't think that was the point. I think that's generally accepted. Its legal jeopardy is that he sought to pay off just before his presidential run,
Hmm.
and it therefore he disguised the payment as
Hmm.
legal.
Yeah,
Again,
and he used an account that he wasn't supposed to.
like,
Like, I fully agree that he was wrong. But in America, when you go to court, you're with a jury, they say, of your peers. It's truly never your peers. But you have to remember there's also a fanboy mentality
mm,
when it comes to him. So when you're choosing a jury, it's very hard to know who's actually a fan of him. And sometimes when you're a fan of an individual, you tend to side with them,
Mm.
even when you know they're completely wrong. Yes, you're supposed to look at the evidence. Yes, you're supposed to say that this was bad behavior. But here, I'm not certain over there, but here, when celebrities do something that's illegal or immoral, people come out with great excuses for their behaviors. And I just feel when they do have this case, he has 34 charges against him, and I don't see 34 charges causing him to be
Incarcerated.
incarcerated.
Mm.
I don't see that. I don't see him going to jail. I do see probably 30 people will find out that 30 people were to blame for 34 issues. Now, for me, the most interesting thing was with the 34 cases, there was allegedly hush money that
Yes.
was given to Bellman
Yes.
about an alleged love child. That's the most interesting part to me because I would love to know who this secret child is. And that's probably one of the best kept secrets in America because, you know, lately we can't keep national secrets to ourselves. But whomever kept this secret, I applaud them on this front. But that was the part that I found more interesting than him having poor business decisions because as I said, I grew up in New York while he was a business person there, and there were many conversations about him not being a great businessman in his dealings. So I'm not shocked, and I think a lot of people feel that that's the behaviors to get to the top, but not realizing that he was given the top. He didn't work his way to the top, you know?
I just ask you at this point, because you are speaking like an American, absolutely. So a kind of British perspective, what you describe sounds, wow, that's acceptable. That's acceptable. But let me just follow on very quickly. Because clearly the Stormy Daniels, the falsifying of official records for election purposes is clearly against the law. But I'm told these are the weakest of the prosecutions that are being put against him. What is more serious is what's happening in Georgia. And what is more serious is what happened in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, where he had those top secret documents and kept them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell us about the Georgia and the keeping of top secret documents. Those cases, I'm told, have a far greater likelihood of impacting on his ability to have free movement in America than, of course, the Stormy Daniels case. The Georgia case seems to be very serious to me. It's gone through your grand jury exercises, and it's very clear that that's extremely serious. And if it's a state prosecution, it's even more serious for the ex-president. Am I right?
So when it comes to the documents that he had, that is more serious. However,
Ah,
what he managed to do was show that he's not the only president to have removed documents
okay,
from the workspace.
correct.
Now,
But he's the only president, forgive me, he's the only president who lied to I think, your National Library in possessing documents. He gave some, but retained hundreds, if not hundreds, and amongst those were at least 100 or so super top secret documents have had in his Florida home.
yes, and this is what I'm saying. He was wrong, right? And I think he's admitting that he's wrong because he said, I, as president, should just have carte blanche. That's kind of the stance he's taking, right? But he's also making sure that he states he didn't actually pack the boxes. So with that side, right? When I say I didn't actually pack these boxes, you're already sliding blame. Like you're not full force throwing blame out there, but you kind of slid it because, well, I didn't actually pack up my office. My assistants did. So you're putting the blame on your assistants because then you're saying the onus is on them, that they should have ensured that these documents weren't boxed up. And so you already have a blame point there. Yes, he kept them. Yes, he didn't properly secure them. He just had them laying on the bedroom floor, which is extremely weird. But he's also saying, hey, I didn't know I couldn't really keep this because I thought everyone was doing it. Former President Bush Sr. had stuff at a bowling alley, and that's, kind of like his throw line. Oh, well, he had stuff at a bowling alley. Well, it's a place that once was a bowling alley that was converted into another building, and that became part of, each president gets their own library when they come out of office, and that became part of his library. So what he likes to do is admit, to a sense, knowledge of it, but then also finds a way to put it on someone else. And that's what he's doing with those documents. Oh, I did have them. I thought I could have them because I'm the president. I thought I could keep this because if I wasn't allowed, why would they box it up and bring it? I didn't box up those boxes. When I opened it, I just assumed I could have it, kind of mentality.
Fascinating.
But I find the way he kind of slithers his way out of full responsibility on anything completely fascinating, because I would never, literally for $1 million, take a job with him, because I know any and everything that goes wrong would fall on anyone other than him. Right? And so every person who has worked for him, you see, has a pound of problems, and still, ironically, people want to work with and for him. That's the ironic part. Like, everyone around you has fallen to bad legal judgment, and they still line up in droves to want to work with him. That part is fascinating to me, because he's the common denominator in everyone's demise. So.
Absolutely. Well, I'm told that that's a particularly serious case, and he's unlikely to get away with that one. But I'm interested in Georgia, because that one would that appears to be a very solid case, to which one that is likely to face either a significant fine or most certainly a recommendation by the jury for him to be incarcerated. Am I reading it wrong? Are all the commentators, objective commentators, in error, do you think?
I will say this. I would love to make a wager with you on the number that will actually stick on Mr. Teflon, and see what number we're closest to. We'll have to figure out a side wager. I don't see Georgia really doing too much for him, because Georgia is a very red state. And remember, juries are comprised of the individuals within the state. So in America, if you watch a lot of trials that we've had, like the big trials, you may feel that this person should have been guilty. And they walk away scot-free. So it's not necessarily if the person is guilty, it's how well the lawyers sell the case during the trial. Because guilt is kind of like a fluid thing here. There's a lot of innocent people in jail and a lot of guilty people walking the streets. The difference is how much you paid for your lawyer. If you had a public defender, chances are you could be innocent, living a guilty life in jail. If you had top dollar, you could be guilty, living an innocent life. It's just unfortunate that way. But I honestly, I don't see too much sticking, nor do I see if he's fined, heavily fined, or something of that nature. People are still going to vote for him. And
Mm.
he said this many years ago, that he could kill someone out
Yeah.
in the street,
Yes.
and no one would bat an eye. And he's just proving what he said years ago.
Yeah.
Basically, I could commit a crime and
Hold on.
no one would care.
Yeah. I've got maybe slightly higher confidence in your jurisprudence in the US. I think I may have. It seems unlikely to me at first glance that the sheer number of charges that he's now facing, that he
Hmm.
storm. But this concept of time, I did want to get on to the issue of, in your opinion, is he a racist? Is he a homophobic? Is he a misogynist?
Um, is he a blatant racist? I would say not blatant, right? Because we have levels to racism. I think he's more of a classist racist than a full racist. As in, if you have money
Right.
and are of a minority group, he's completely tolerant of you. So it becomes more of a class issue. I remember when I was younger and the Central Park Five happened. I view that very much on a racist campaign, um, for his stance on it. Excuse me. Um, is he completely racist? I don't think so, because I think he would even be okay if his daughter Tiffany married a non-Caucasian person with the right amount of money. Like she could definitely marry a Saudi prince and he wouldn't care. So I don't think he's like 100% racist, but I think he is also knows how to fuel the fire when it comes to stuff. He knows that in America you can divide people
Yes. Yes.
by race and by religion, and definitely by gender. So he's very good with that, but he also doesn't like poor white people either.
He's not. I really.
you know, he very much doesn't like them either. So he's more of a classist than anything, but he's definitely has some mid-level xenophobia, homophobia, misogyny, and racism, as a whole. But he will definitely deal with people who have more money. That tends to erase any of their quote unquote misgivings. The more money they have, like he thinks Oprah's amazing, and in one of his interviews, he said he would have loved to run with Oprah, and we all know Oprah's a woman, and she's Black, so. In case there's a listener out there who doesn't know who Oprah Winfrey is. So he's fascinated by her and totally okay. He likes Kanye West. So there's a lot of minorities that he does like and considers himself to be friends with. However, he's more against poor people, I think, like the more poor you are, the more your issues kind of stands out than anything. But of course, he has issues with those groups.
Yeah. If I'm, Jay, this is really, because you've there's a narrative in this country, most certainly. There's Trump to be all of those highlights, and of course is flouting the law continuous and
Hmm.
relate here, it's highly likely he will be prosecuted and potentially end up in prison, potentially. Okay, and so we look at almost aghast with the American experience. But what you provide is a different perspective on the man. Okay, who you're recognizing his incredible weaknesses, but also noting that it's very much a generational. It's those in my age group, as it were, who are
Hmm.
backbone, okay, and those in other age groups are simply disaffected. They feel as if they're lost out, which is which is a comparison applicable here in Britain as well. I observe as well, and I note your comment on class. That's true. Uh, how class plays out in the United States, it most certainly plays out here in Britain, without a shadow of a doubt. Class most certainly plays out. And to be able to divide and rule is a tactic I've seen used by those in power, both in politics or financial, used
Hmm.
again, most certainly as a tool to exercise their influence. There's no doubt about that. So I can see the comparator. Can I just, we've only got maybe 2 minutes.
Okay.
And I'm first of all, I'm going to express our appreciation, because we know it's early morning for you over there. So we want to express our appreciation. You made the effort. You provided useful insight. So my last question really focuses on his wife. I want to ask this question. Clearly, she's been embarrassed on many occasions. And I'm told likely that she will force him, particularly once all these cases are very much in the public eye. Do you think that will happen?
You went out a little bit. May you repeat that question?
Sorry, yes. His wife,
Hmm.
yeah. Is it likely that she will divorce him? So it'll be a
No,
divorcee? No.
no, no. And I say that 1,000,000%. While he's pursuing the public life, I don't see her ever trying to divorce him. As we know, she received an Einstein visa,
Yeah.
and she was largely unknown to everyone, and her talents, um, we still haven't discovered what they were. Um, I don't see her being able to navigate in US society if he were to become president and she's his former wife. I don't see a world where that would work for her. So she would stay with him. And also, him and his misgivings doesn't impact her really. We don't see her anywhere with him right now.
Probably not. Yeah. Okay.
She's wherever, and he's doing whatever or whomever, and she's receiving the lifestyle benefits.
Yes, she
And
is.
perhaps that's their arrangement. I don't say anything about this publicly. Privately, I'm not okay with it, but I do enjoy this particular lifestyle. So while it benefits me, I'll continue to live in it. Now, when their son becomes of legal age, I do think they'll probably part ways.
I would imagine. My favorite question. If you were to gain the Republican ticket to be their candidate for president next time round, do you believe that women, so people of color, women generally, would vote?
Would women vote for Trump? Oh gosh.
Then?
Unfortunately, yeah. And this is the other thing. I don't know whom from the other parties are even running, because no one has said anything about possibly running for presidential term, because they're all waiting on the Democrat side to find out if Biden is going to run for reelection.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
So because of that uncertainty, there's a lot of people who aren't out there getting their name kind of, out in the public,
Yes.
which is bad because Trump has announced early on his interest, and put his name in the hat properly. So he's getting a lot of time. DeSantis expected to put his name in the hat. And the only reason he hasn't yet is because Florida law currently, until they change it, which they plan to, states that he'll have to step down as governor to run for president.
Yes.
So he hasn't formally announced, but he's been on tour around the country, kind of trying to get, votes preemptively.
And what about Africans generally, people across America?
What about which group of people?
African Americans, black people in America. What do you sense the general feeling of Trump?
I think a lot of them would prefer Trump over DeSantis.
Okay.
And to be quite honest, I would probably prefer Trump over DeSantis, not to sound crass, but he's old and he might not even make it through the whole term. So who knows what we would have, Now, I'm more concerned with who his running mate would be, which it's rumored that it would be Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh my gosh.
Which is, that's a rumor. It hasn't been dispelled, but, so that he can get the female vote.
Oh.
But I'm hoping that women wouldn't vote for him, for her, because that I definitely wouldn't want. Because, the vice president is who takes over if the president doesn't make it fully through the term.
Yes.
And I wouldn't want that prospect.
Gosh, can you? Oh.
That is definitely not a place that I would like to reside. I may have to come over there, but I don't. I wouldn't want that. But I feel when it comes to DeSantis and Trump, that more people would take Trump more so as the lesser of two evils. And I do think he is the lesser of those two evils.
We've almost run out of time now. So this.
Oh, well, I'll have to come back then.
There are the questions, but yeah, this has been a fascinating insight, and I certainly it's interesting the nuance and difference in tone that's here versus Americans that I've encountered, and you've exemplified quite a number of those difference in nuance. I'm going to thank you for your insights. Okay, this will cause a debate, I'm sure, elsewhere.
Yes. And I really am going to think of this wager, and I'm going to drop it into the group later.
Okay.
We're going to come up with a good number and then a good wager, because you guys all hear it first. Okay. Martin is going to honor the side of the wager when, unfortunately, I come out the victor.
Wow. What it's like these days. That's bet for you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. You take care. I'll be in touch very soon. I'll be in touch very soon.
Yes. Blessings to all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Wow. Now, wasn't that interesting? That was quite interesting. I've got to say that we gained insight to a African-American perspective on the political and social scenes in America. Okay. And I chose Jay because she provided an interesting insight. Okay. Because we often get these very strong anti-establishment types who speak. But now we needed to hear middle African-Americans with a sort of middling view. Okay. And it's interesting. Views kind of waver, and the views of Trump, clearly not my view of Trump, but possibly that I've been exposed to a menu calls my views to harden. Okay, I believe he is a racist. I believe he is a misogynist, and I mean certainly he is an homophobic as well. It's no different to what has been said and described as the Metropolitan Police Force in the Casey report recently. Okay, it'd be bad for America, and most certainly bad for the world. But she says DeSantis would be even worse. So that suggests that that country needs to do some serious navel gazing. It needs some therapy. That's to put it very mildly, very, very mildly. So let's see what happens. But before I go, I need to give a big shout out to the man, then Carl Shucker. Rest in peace. I was unable to be at the night last night, but I do intend to visit, and I want to give respect to Shucker's family and all those that know him. So I'm just going to playing some music by Shucker, the sound man, the audio genius, the sound man that shaped tens of thousands of lives of African peoples here in Britain. Give a shout out to Shucker.